Today we are talking to the creator of a gruesomely funny tale, Theodora Hendrix and the Monstrous League of Monsters. Welcome, Jordon Kopy.
Thank you so much.
Did I get the name right?
Jordan Kopy, you were perfect.
Kopy, all right. Kopy. Before we go into the story, who was this? What age group was the book written for, and how would you classify it?
Sure. So it's targeted towards ages 8 to 12. And it's a story that's sort of, I think, a lot of fun for parents to maybe read with kids that are still transitioning to independent reading. But also, I think, appropriate for independent readers as well, depending on, on the kid and the comfort level. And I would classify it as contemporary fantasy, and I think it's often sort of chalked up as comedy horror.
Comedy horror, yes. Okay. Well, I understand that the Monstrous League has 3 rules. What are those 3 rules?
Sure. So the first rule and the most important rule of the Monstrous League of Monsters is that monsters must be kept hidden from humans. The second rule is that monsters have to help bad monsters to become good monsters. And the third rule is that monsters need to keep humans safe.
So what happens when the zombie Georgie and his cat Bandit find an abandoned baby?
Oh, well, it's quite a quandary because the rules come into conflict with each other. They really shouldn't be taking a human baby away from the graveyard because that would violate the first rule. But in an effort to keep her safe from a very hungry hobgoblin who's creeping around the side of a headstone, they end up snatching the baby and bringing her back to the Monstrous League of Monsters. We call it the MLM for short, to their mansion in a little countryside sleepy village called Appleton in England.
And I am intrigued by the names of all of these characters. Can you tell us a few, because they're so much fun?
Thank you. Yeah, so I really played around with sticking to some of the very traditional lore around some of the very well-known monsters. So Dracula is still Dracula, albeit a bit more of a fun-loving Dracula, slightly less terrifying version. And then some like the gargoyles are Bob and Sally, because I wanted to make some of the names a little bit more accessible and familiar so that we could focus on the story and not sort of, there's a big ensemble cast, so I wanted to make it easy for young readers to keep up with who is who. And as for Theodora, that really just popped into my head and it felt right, so I stuck with it. And then I actually found out months later when I was reading it with my grandfather, that was his grandmother's name, my great-great-grandmother.
Oh, goodness.
So it was this really lovely coincidence. Yeah.
That's really lovely. Now, they say that this is your debut novel, but isn't this a collection? Explain that.
Yeah, sure. So Theodora Hendrix and the Monstrous League of Monsters is the first in a trilogy, which we call the Theodora Hendrix series for short. And that is followed by Theodora Hendrix and The Curious Case of the Cursed Beetle, and Theodora Hendrix and the Snare of the Shadowmongers.
Okay.
So this is our opening book.
Okay. And this story is a long way from your day job as a financial services professional. What gave you the idea?
Yep. So I had always been very engaged in the arts. I was a very serious ballet dancer growing up, did a lot of theater, a lot of painting, drawing, all of that good stuff. And I was actually, post-college, post-university, doing a little auditioning and all of that fun stuff and studying for law school. And the same day that something I was working on in that world got canceled, I got an offer to join one of the big banks and kind of just ran with it. But I realized very quickly that I was really missing the creative stuff, which is had always been such a big part of my identity. But I had moved to Manhattan, I had signed a lease, I was in it. And my mom sort of said to me, I think you need to find a way to still be creative. But I was, new in a bank, so I was working really long hours. And really, I just always been a voracious reader. And so I decided I was going to take a pass at writing a book because that was something I could do at 11 o'clock at night when I got home and not sort of disturb anyone. And it really just went from there. Yeah.
Do other writers influence you, like J.K. Rowling? Have they?
Yes, I think you'd get a lot of that sort of I think J.K. Rowling was a huge influence. I was a massive Harry Potter fan growing up. Some of my favorite childhood memories was my mom taking me to the midnight releases at, Barnes and Nobles or Borders and staying up all night on the couch reading the next book. I was a huge doll fan growing up. And I think I've got some influences as well from different art forms. The Munsters, that show from the 1960s, a little Addams Family, maybe a little Nancy Drew. So it's really kind of a mix of all the things that I really love.
Interestingly, some of the pages in the book are dark. Tell us about that. I mean, most of the pages, or many of the pages, are white, and then some of them are dark.
I thought that was a really, really cool thing that they did. It really, I think, stands out. I was lucky to be paired with a really fabulous illustrator, Chris Jevons. And we worked very closely together because, as you know, having read it, the book is highly illustrated in black and white.
Yes, beautifully.
Thank you. He's wonderful and was quite patient with me when I sent him pages of character descriptions and my own little sketches. And I think that plays really well with the fact that the book is light, but it does have those spooky moments, those darker moments. And I think it really reflects that really beautifully.
You dedicate this book to your mom. Why?
So my mom is, very, very encouraging and awesome. So single mom when I was growing up. And she became a reading teacher with a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old at home and supported us in aspirations and dreams, 1 million dance competitions for me, horseback riding for my sister. And she actually was a reading teacher for middle grade. So we were always exchanging books with each other. That was kind of our thing. And when I drafted this is actually the second manuscript I wrote. And I did it on a bit of a lark. And she read every single draft. I think I had, I don't know, like 30 plus, 40 plus drafts. And she read every single one. And that felt like if there was anyone that I was going to dedicate my first book to, it really had to be her.
That's a good reason. What is your writing schedule like?
Varied. So having, working in finance where I was holding a quite senior position, I have a team that was in a lot of different countries. So I'm kind of on a very odd schedule. So I've really trained myself to write whenever and wherever. I'm kind of famous for lugging my laptop around with me in my bag. And if I get a seat on the tube or the train, I'll sit there and write. Work ends a little early, I'll dart over to a cafe. And it's really just kind of whenever I can fit that in. If I'm on deadlines, it might mean a lot of midnight writing, which is fine because the witching hour is really my time. But really, it's just sort of a no prisoners attitude of it's hard to fit in, but it's important to me. So I fit it where I can. And sometimes that also means I go weeks kind of without socializing, but it's worth it.
Where did you learn the craft?
I think first and foremost, as a reader, I was very interested always growing up in the way a story unfolded. I don't care so much to be surprised by the ending. I would actually be really anxious to know the ending up front and then figure out how they got from point A to B. And it used to drive my mom nuts because when I was little, I had a bad habit of going to read the last page before I'd gotten there. And when I was in school, I was political science and law, and I was, writing a lot of papers, writing a senior thesis. So I spent a lot of time thinking about what the structure of a narrative is, if not a story, but a narrative, and did do some creative writing classes at college. But really, there's so much information out there. I'm thinking like Writer's Digest. I'm thinking writers and artists that's free, and you can learn so much if you're willing to invest the time in doing that. And so I think I read every article on Writer's Digest and just kind of went for it.
That's great. Where did you find your agent, and how did you find your agent? And being a native of New York, did that help?
My agents are actually here in London.
Okay, that's right. You are in London.
So I'm from New York, but yes, I live in London now. So I think all in, I had reached out to 24 agents, and I had, within 6 weeks, 6 full requests and the offer. And my agent at the time has now moved on, but was at a very, well-known agency here in London. And I was doing a pitch contest on what was Twitter and is now, I think, X. And she liked it. And I submitted, through the slush pile, and just referenced in my query letter that she had liked it. And that was sort of it.
That's highly unusual and lucky, I think.
I think so.
Yeah, but then, 25, did you say 25 queries or something like that?
Yeah.
24. Yeah. That's not unusual. Did the book go through a lot of editing, both from you, and you said that, you had 30 drafts or something, and then did it also go through more editing after that when you found the publisher?
Yeah, so it went through, most of those drafts were through me because I am a very type A perfectionist, and I had done so much research about the querying process that I knew that you really have to have something that's almost ready to go before if you want to set yourself up for success. And I think that's the other thing. I was writing for 7 years seriously before I sort of threw in for an agent. So I didn't rush to that. I really made an effort to make sure that what I was putting out there was what I, ready, basically.
Oh, and what, did you have early readers then, or how did you decide that you were ready?
Well, I have a writing group, and so feedback from them. I've got a friend who's a professional screenwriter, feedback from her. But really, I think if you read widely in the genre and the age group that you're writing for, and you're a critical reader, I think you get a sense of, yes, this feels right. The pacing feels right. So when I signed with my agent, the original novel, I think, was 24,000 words, and she came back and said, I need you to add, at least 5,000 more. So we did that. We did another round. And then when I signed with my editor, we tweaked certain things. One character they felt was too scary, so we swapped that for a different character. We deepened some characterization and tightened some plotting, but really the plot itself didn't change. It expanded, but there was nothing significant that we kind of swapped either way.
Good for you. Is the children's market hard to break into, do you think?
I do think so. And I think the reason for that, I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think children's market in general is very driven by trends in a way that doesn't happen at speed in the same way for the adult market necessarily. And I think sometimes there's the sense of, oh, we've had too many vampires, or, oh, we've had too many wizards now. We need something new. And so you don't want to chase a trend, because that ends in heartache, but you also don't want to write something that somebody's going to say, oh, if only you'd come at me, 3 years earlier. So I do think that's tough. And I also think that adult literature gets a lot more coverage than the children's market does in the major publications. And so I think it's just not necessarily as upfront and center. And so I think it's just a smaller sort of thing. And that makes it a little bit, more competitive in some ways.
This book, to me, it appeals not only to kids, but it's refreshing for adults too, because all we hear is gloom and doom. And I wanted to ask you, what do you want people to take away from Theodora Hendrix?
Firstly, I hope people walk away and think that was so much fun.
Yes, yes.
As you said, it's been a lot of.
I can attest to that. It is fun.
Thank you. And I think, books, I think exposing children to books with a lot of different perspectives and different objectives is really important. And this one, I wanted it to be fun. I want to help inspire a love of reading in readers.
Yes.
But I also hope, Theodora is a misfit. And that's something I identify with. And certainly when I was her age, I remember eating lunch alone, sometimes skipping it to not have to ask to sit at a table. And I just want, those misfits out there to feel seen and to just know that it's not always like that. And what makes you unique or what makes you kind of weird to other people is actually what's going to be like some of the really cool things about you. And you just have to find the people that recognize that. And so I think it's really those two objectives that I hope people walk away with.
That's great. What are you writing next after this series?
So I am simultaneously working on another middle grade novel, also kind of in the comedy, horror, contemporary fantasy. I would say it's kind of Theodora adjacent. And then I'm also working on a very dark young adult contemporary fantasy novel. So two totally different things.
Yeah, totally.
But having a blast writing both.
Do you have any advice for writers who are just now trying to break into the children's market?
Yes, I think there's two big things that you can do to position yourself for success. And the first is read everything for the age group. If you don't know what the current sort of, and I'm not talking about trends so much as what's the plot structure look like? What's the pacing? What kind of characters are we drawn to? As the world evolves, different things are going to reach and speak to different generations potentially. So read everything, study what the author does well, study how they get from point A to point B. And I think the second thing is you have to write. You have to make the time to write. And I know that is so hard for so many of us. But you can always edit a page that's written. You can't edit a blank page, and you've got to get something bright and shiny and new if you want to seek out an agent. And so the best way I think to position yourself for that is to read a lot and to write a lot.
Right. Good for you. Well, thank you, Jordan Kopy. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. This was so much fun.